There are wars that end with a treaty. There are wars that end with one final battle. But this war might end with a feeling. On the 14th day of the conflict, a reporter asked Donald Trump a simple question. When will this war be over? The president paused for a moment. Then he gave an answer that left the room unusually quiet. He said, when I feel it in my bones. Not when Iran surrenders. Not when the Strait of Hormuz reopens. Not when a ceasefire agreement is signed. Just when the President of the United States feels that the war has reached its end. It was an unusual way to describe the timeline of a conflict that has already shaken global energy markets. Because this war is not a small regional dispute. It is a confrontation happening in the narrow corridor through which a large portion of the world's oil supply normally flows. And on the very same day that answer was given, another announcement came out of the Pentagon. 2,200 United States Marines were being deployed to the Middle East. They are traveling aboard the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli, LHA-7, currently based in Japan. The vessel is sailing toward the Persian Gulf carrying what military planners call a Marine Expeditionary Unit. On board are helicopter gunships, armored vehicles, transport aircraft, special operations teams, and hundreds of infantry Marines trained for amphibious combat. The deployment was requested by United States Central Command and approved by U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The official mission is simple. He helped reopen the shipping route through the Strait of Hormuz. But in military terms, the decision says something much more significant. Because Marines are not bombing crews, they are infantry. They are the force you send when something must be taken physically, held physically, or defended in close proximity to hostile territory. And that suggests the nature of the conflict may already be changing. For 2 weeks, American and Israeli aircraft have been striking Iranian military targets from the air. Drones, missiles, and fighter jets have launched attacks from long distances, operating from the relative safety of the sky. But Marines are not sent when the air campaign has already achieved its objective. They are sent when the air campaign has not. And in this war, the objective that still remains unresolved is the Strait of Hormuz. At its narrowest point, the strait is only about 33 kilometers wide. On one side lies Iran's coastline, stretching for hundreds of kilometers along the Persian Gulf. Over several decades, Iran has built a dense network of coastal defense systems along that shoreline. Anti-ship missile batteries are positioned in hardened installations. Some are hidden in underground facilities. Others are mounted on mobile launchers that can relocate within hours. These weapons were designed specifically for one mission, to target ships attempting to pass through the strait. Many of the missiles have ranges measured in hundreds of kilometers. That means a launcher positioned deep inland can still reach vessels operating in the middle of the waterway. During the past 2 weeks, the United States has claimed to strike more than 15,000 Iranian targets. Production facilities, weapons depots, military bases, and research centers have all been hit. But there is a problem that air power alone cannot easily solve. Iran's coastal missile network was built to survive sustained bombing. Launchers can move. Missiles are stored in underground bunkers. Crews disperse and reassemble when necessary. Destroying one launcher may take one strike. Destroying an entire network of launchers, storage sites, and trained operators is an entirely different challenge. And that challenge is the reason the Strait of Hormuz remains closed. The shipping numbers reveal how dramatic the situation has become. According to maritime data from Lloyd's List Intelligence, only 77 ships have passed through the strait so far in March 2026. During the same period last year, more than 1,200 ships made that journey. That represents a collapse of roughly 94% in maritime traffic. More than 1,000 cargo vessels are now anchored outside the strait, waiting. Insurance companies have withdrawn coverage for the route. Shipping companies are refusing to send their crews into those waters no matter how high freight prices climb. At the same time, an interesting shift is happening in international diplomacy. Several European countries, including Germany, France, and Italy, are no longer waiting for American naval escorts. Instead, they have begun direct discussions with Iran to request safe passage for their ships. India has reportedly taken the process even further. Indian diplomats are said to have secured permission for 2 LPG tankers to pass through the strait as part of bilateral negotiations with Tehran. In other words, some countries that remain politically aligned with the United States are simultaneously negotiating with the country that the United States is currently bombing. This is what Iran's strategy looks like when it works. Not necessarily a clear military victory, but a gradual fragmentation of the international coalition opposing it. Meanwhile, the United States continues preparing for a different scenario. If air power cannot reopen the strait, ground forces may have to create the conditions that allow shipping to resume. That is precisely the kind of mission Marine expeditionary units were designed for. They can launch helicopter assaults onto islands. They can conduct amphibious landings on hostile shorelines, and they can establish defensive perimeters in contested territory faster than most other military units. But these operations also carry significant risks. Because the environment surrounding the Strait of Hormuz remains one of the most heavily defended maritime corridors in the world, sea mines can be deployed quickly. Drone boats can approach large ships at high speed. Coastal missile batteries can fire from hidden positions along hundreds of kilometers of coastline. Every one of those threats remains possible, and yet the Marines are still sailing. The reason is simple. The global economy cannot sustain a 94% reduction in shipping through the Persian Gulf indefinitely. Our oil prices have already fluctuated dramatically, swinging between $88 and $117 per barrel in just 2 weeks. The United States has released hundreds of millions of barrels from its strategic petroleum reserve in an attempt to stabilize markets. But that reserve is finite, and it was never intended to replace the flow of oil through the Strait of Hormuz for an extended period. The only long-term solution is reopening the waterway itself. While all of this is happening at sea, another image emerged on land. In Tehran, tens of thousands of people gathered for the annual Al-Quds Day rally. Among the crowd were senior Iranian officials, including the country's president and members of its national security leadership. They appeared in public, standing before cameras and photographers. That image created a striking contrast with statements from Washington suggesting that Iranian leaders were hiding underground. Between those two narratives lies the reality of the war on its 14th day. One side says the enemy's leadership is collapsing. The other side is holding public rallies in its capital. And somewhere between those two realities, 2,200 Marines are moving toward the narrowest point of the world's most critical energy corridor. Back in Washington, the president says the war will end when he feels it in his bones. In Tehran, the message is very different. The strait will remain closed. The fight will continue. And every day that passes, more forces are arriving in the region. Because once a conflict reaches this stage, it rarely ends quickly. Sometimes it ends with negotiations. Sometimes it ends with exhaustion. And sometimes it ends only after the world realizes that what began as a short campaign has become something much larger than anyone expected.